I'm recording this, and I can't hear anyone, so I'm just going to assume you can all hear me, unless I get any messages in the chat, but I don't think so. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Yael Feldman. I am currently working in London, and I've had a bit of a odd career journey, so I'm just here to chat to you guys about, like, the world keeps going, so we need to keep trying too. And you can also learn in surprising ways. Start any way you can, take the opportunity. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my journey. So I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is where the pin is, all the way down there. It's a beautiful place with a lot of history that's very important, but a lot of people don't know about us. I went to a religious school, and most of the students who finished school with me went on to university. So we're all very motivated and encouraged to get a degree. But the careers I was given advice to follow at the time, aren't really the careers that are hiring at the moment. So even though a lot of teachers and parents and adults that I respected gave me advice, a lot of what they were saying didn't really apply, and I think the same might be true for you. And because you're in it, you're probably more aware of the industries that you should be looking at. For example, the top 3 industries hiring on healthcare, logistics, and teaching. And then in 2010, when I started looking for work, it was technology, finance, and marketing. This is all from this LinkedIn data on this Medium article. But the industry keeps changing, so you kind of have to keep being a bit flexible with it. Then the university I went to, which most of you have never heard of probably, but it's a really well-respected university in the world and in Southern Africa, where there aren't that many universities. It's the University of the Witwatersrand, and I studied fine arts there at the School of Arts. Wits, as we used to call it, is really well known for its politics, its engineering, and its medical studies. So me studying arts isn't like the most known course to do there. But it's a very political university, and historically it's more known for a lot of apartheid protests that happened there. It was a very anti-apartheid university. It's where Nelson Mandela studied. And more recently, it was known for more protests about Rhodes Must Fall and about student fees. So it's a very protest political institution. Then there's certain things I learned at university that helped me and certain things that didn't. These are the things that I learned at university that helped me further on at work. How to advocate for myself and my work. Universities are all different. The structure of my university meant that we had to fight to get academic support, and we had to chase lecturers to explain their expectations of us. So things weren't always straightforward, but you really had to advocate for yourself in order to do your best. The next thing I learned that's really been useful is meeting deadlines. If a deadline is unreasonable, you can often renegotiate the expectations, which it sometimes was. How to solve problems. So solving problems wasn't always so clear. Sometimes to write an essay or create a project, you had to learn a new skill or find the right person to ask the questions. So that was a lot of problem solving at university, which isn't in the coursework. Then some of the hard skills I learned at university are actually the ones that really helped me. For example, I learned a little bit of Photoshop at university, and someone showed us the basics, and we had to take it on in a creative way at that point. But once I learned the basics, I could ask more questions about how to further develop it, and that helped me get into learning more of the Adobe suite and getting into the design field in general. So sometimes those hard skills that you might take for granted, like a language you learn, a code language you learn, learning to use Microsoft Word or Excel or check grammar, that those hard skills can be really useful in finding work in ways that you don't expect. So yeah, those hard skills can often be more helpful than the academic skills we need to complete our degrees. Then another important thing I learned is how to collaborate with other students, which I found the most enjoyable part of my course, and I think other students did too. And I think I learned the most while collaborating, and I learned how to collaborate because it wasn't easy at first. Part of our coursework was working together, and it was really challenging. A lot of us came from all of us came from completely different backgrounds, different cultures, um, different educations, different cities, different places in Africa. Some of us were younger, some of us were older. I went to university straight out of high school, which maybe wasn't like the way things are done now, but that was the best opportunity for me at the time. I think a lot of you can relate to that. But some of the people in my course had already done previous degrees or had previous careers and were in different positions. So there was a lot to learn from each other. And culturally and like financially, everyone comes from a very different place. And it was incredibly interesting and useful to learn about each other, but also to learn how to speak to each other in a way that we could work together. So that's a lot of negotiation, and then also at the time, we didn't all have laptops, and you couldn't expense your laptop to a student loan, at least in my first 2 years of studies. So we had shared library computers or lab computers. So we had to negotiate to share that technology at the time, which was also tricky. But I think it helped us divide our time and share our skills better. The other thing, when you're studying for a degree, it's really stressful. So learning to communicate effectively with students, lecturers, and administrative staff while you're under stress can be really difficult, really challenging, but it's also really important, and it helps you in other places in your life too. The one amazing thing when you're at university, your fellow students, you all have a shared goal to get the best out of your degree. So this helps you collaborate and also helps you advocate for each other. This is also the best network that you can make at this point, and you never know where you land up further down the line. And it's really interesting, and it's really good to keep in contact with that network. You can really work to build each other up. Then the most challenging thing for me is how to manage the politics. This really isn't something that comes easily to me, so I have to figure out a way to read into the politics of a situation. So every country, workplace, and classroom has its own power dynamic, and I find it really helpful to figure out the incentives in the situation to understand what everyone's trying to get from the situation. And then if you learn those incentives, you can better understand how to thrive. This is not based on any big research. It's inspired by some of the thoughts in Michael Lewis's description of incentives in The Big Short. So I've got two examples here. The one is an office dynamic. So at the top, you get the company director, and their incentive is to optimize profit for their product. Then below that, you get a team manager, and their incentive is to optimize the output of their team, and they report to the director. Then the worker's incentive is to work at the role and report to the manager. So everyone has a different relationship to each other, and everyone has a different incentive to get the best out of their role. So it's really helpful when someone asks you something, you know where they're coming from, and you can respond in a better way. And then a university dynamic is even more complicated. So at the top of the structure is the dean of the university. Their main incentive is the optimal research and the financial continuity of the institution. Then you get the lecturers or professors underneath them, and their incentives are the optimal research to report to, and they report to other lecturers and to the dean. They need to be recognized as an expert in their field, and they also have to teach and mentor students, which is very similar to the postgrad student whose incentive is to optimize their research, become an expert, obtain a further degree, and mentor undergrad students. So these can all often be challenging incentives in the fact that they challenge each other and they don't always work well together. So often the lecturers and the postgrad students doing their research doesn't help them in mentoring and teaching other students. So that can be difficult, but often if you get to them on their level and you can negotiate some help in that way. Then the undergrad student, they want to get their degree and improve their employment options. So that's just a quick chart that I did, and I do it for a few situations I get into where I'm not sure where I stand or how to make the best of the situation. I find it really helpful. Hopefully you will too. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so this was, I think this is wrong format. There. So when I graduated, it was 2008, and I graduated high school in 2008, and that was the financial crisis. But the knock-on effect affected us for the next decade, and some of that is still affecting us today. So it's a similar pattern to what's happened now with COVID, that it's really knocked the jobs market, and we couldn't. All of the job patterns that had existed before didn't really exist then. So we all had to kind of make our way. A few of us went on to do traditional work at the time, but that the world keeps changing. So financial crash, a pandemic, it changes the market and the way that we can work. So a lot of the advice I got when leaving university was outdated. I got told that if you wanted to work in advertising, you had to go to a big agency. But you can actually do it a few different ways. You could work in-house at a company doing advertising. You could work for yourself, advertising your own product or your friends. And you can get creative and find ways to build that career yourself. most ad spending is online, so you can actually start advertising for yourself or for other people and organizations that you know with not that much capital. Another thing I got told, I did an arts degree, so a lot of people were trying to become artists, and we were told that if you want to become an artist, you needed to be signed by a gallery. And it's very similar for musicians needing to be signed by record labels, writers, publishers. So these aren't the only options, especially now when you can publish yourself online and share across different platforms. There's many more options. So I say if you want to make art, make the art and then find a way to show it to people, find a way to sell it to people. It is possible. Another myth I got told was that artists starve, which I think a lot of big organizations like to tell people that myth to discourage them from being creative. But it is possible to manage the creative and business side of your art while earning a livable income. You might not be the most famous creative in the world, but it's still there's a space for everyone to be creative and to produce creative work and to contribute to the world around them. So the point here is any advice you're given, question that, because the world keeps changing and it's changing really fast at the moment. So just a quick chart to show you my life after university. So I graduated while I was in university. Myself and my classmates were all trying to find work in the creative industry. We applied for all entry-level roles, every internship, and I had no success. So I did a bit of ad hoc work. I waitressed, I looked after people's children, I worked at music festivals. I know that's not really an option at the moment. I helped people with administrative work. I took on any little ad hoc work that I could to keep busy and earn a little bit. I continued attending events, so art openings, festivals, any kind of networking opportunity. I started attending those while I was at university, and I continued attending them afterwards. And networking events. I know those are all online at the moment. Then my first big move, I began renting a shared studio at a community group studio. And this is where I got to meet a lot of other artists or creatives in the same position that I was in, where we were starting out. So we had a lot of shared questions, but we could also help each other and support each other. So through being at this group studio, I started exhibiting and selling my paintings. So that's the first 9 months after graduating. And then 18 months after being at the studio, my whole income was coming from art, so I didn't have to do any of the ad hoc work anymore. Then 2.5 years in, I started to feel a bit lonely, like I wasn't being challenged, and I started missing the collaborative work that I used to do at university. So I started looking for more collaborative work. So I was working more, helping people with their websites and design their books. Then in 2016, I moved to London and had to start again. I still had some ongoing projects that I was working on, but I had to start from scratch, and I started out waitressing here and doing some freelance jobs. And while I was applying for everything I could see that came up, and lots of things keep popping up, so you have to keep looking on jobs boards on LinkedIn. And then I also tried to join another group studio, but I couldn't really find a creative community in London where I could fit in. It wasn't the communities in London were more isolated than I felt comfortable with, and I just felt like doing art wasn't the right thing for me at the moment. So then I began looking for a more corporate role. So using my freelancing experience, I started looking for design work and web design work. And I also did some freelancing while I was looking. My first role lasted 2 years. The business closed, and then I went back to freelancing. I freelanced for a few months, and through freelancing, I found my current role, which is a great team that I've been in for the past 2 years, which I've really enjoyed. And then I just wanted to talk to you about ways that Educating Beyond Borders can support you with opportunities to contribute to live projects online at the moment. We deliver work experience in most degree courses and profession. And if you're looking into more of this, please speak to Rox, because she's got all the contact details, and there's more information on the website also. And then I just wanted to end with some advice a friend once gave me about work. So you can measure a job based on the 3 things: the work, the people, and the pay. And you have to compromise somewhere always. You're lucky if you get 2 out of 3. That's a good job. And then the important thing is to know what you value most when you're looking for a role. And this changes over time. So you have to keep asking yourself what you value most. And we all have to compromise somewhere. And then also, just keep checking in with yourself to see what's important, because these things change over time and your priorities keep changing. So at the moment in my current role, the work, I enjoy 80% of the time. The people are really good. I've got a really great manager who backs me, and the pay is okay, but I'm living within my means, and I'm able to save. So for me, the pay is perfect. I know I could be potentially more ambitious, but for me, the most important thing is the people that I work with and the work that I do. So you do have to compromise a bit somewhere. And I know that's not always the case. In this current role that I'm in, my previous manager was really not that great, and I was going to leave because of him, but then he left. So within time, the role changed because the team changed. So sometimes you just need to be patient, and sometimes you need to leave, but you'll know according to your priorities when that's the right time and what to compromise. And then some coping skills I've learned for when you feel a bit lost. So I know I've been in the job hunt and felt like I wasn't getting any success, but it's important to keep making the effort. It may not seem fruitful, but it usually pays off in the long term. So that's working on your own project, or consistently applying for stuff, or reaching out to your networks. It's important to keep making that effort and be as consistent as you can in that. Ask lots of questions, even if you know the answer, even if you think it's repetitive or obvious. It usually makes you look smarter to ask the questions. So that if that's going back to a lecturer, even if you finish their course, you can usually still reach out. Or if that's asking an administrator the process on how to fill a form, it's really important to ask those questions. Take a walk. I know this isn't always an option. It wasn't for me in Johannesburg where I grew up. There were safety issues there taking walks. So sometimes when you can't take a walk, take a look outside, and you'll notice when you take a look outside that the world keeps going. So I think it's important to have some perspective in that. Stop for 5 minutes, take a breath, refocus on the best use of your time. Even 5 minutes can help you when you feel like you're lost. Also have a laugh. Sometimes that means calling a friend to have a laugh. Sometimes your friends aren't going to cheer you up, so find a funny video on YouTube to laugh at. But I find that really brings me back to my focus. And then don't be afraid to ask your fellow students or apprentices or colleagues if they need help. You might not be the expert yet, but sometimes when you share your knowledge, you often learn as much as you share. So I think that's really important. And then also just give yourself context about where you started, because if you actually look back, you'll see you've come a really long way and you've grown. So that hopefully gives you the motivation to push through. And then don't try be someone else. The people you respect will often see through that, and it takes energy away from your more legitimate goals. And then just start any way you can. Take the opportunity, start asking questions, and if it's the wrong path, you'll be able to exit later, but you just need to start on your journey. And then also thank yourself for your effort. You may not get the recognition from other people, but don't let that affect your confidence. So just be thankful for the effort that you've put in. And then the only thing I would fake is confidence. If you don't feel it, fake it. And that's a part of advocating for yourself. So the closing slide, the world keeps going. So we need to keep trying too. You can learn in surprising ways. Start any way you can. Take the opportunity. Thank you. Hey. Yeah. You can also always type in the chat. So that was after I left, but there were always ongoing protests like throughout my studies. Is just I think what hit the news and carried on here. Yeah, I'd say even with the Black Lives Matter protests early last year, or was it August, when they pushed that statue over in Bristol, similar things happened in South Africa, and nothing that made the news at the time, but there was always protests, so it was very political. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I mean, you might not be able to go into the career that you planned, but I think you've got some really good skills that you've been working on with your languages and through your degree. So it could probably be applied in a lot of other places too. Um, yeah, I mean, I would think Spanish and Arabic would help you get into a lot of different industries, even if it's not into trade or with the companies you thought you would work for. Also, so much is remote at the moment. So even yeah, it's the world, like, yeah, you just have to kind of change your expectations because it's not we're not going to be able to do the same roles that the people older than us could get into. Yeah. I think you just have to focus on your skills first, I think, because those would be really useful to a lot of people instead of your experience. Um, yeah, I think the problem with like the teaching profession is they don't really know the experience you go through, because their job is just to kind of get you to get the best results that you can, and it reflects well on them if you go to university. Um, so they don't always know what happens afterwards. So don't lose faith because of that. Um, but yeah, probably going to have to carve out your own path. And I think you're well equipped to do it. And Rox has some really good work like remote work placements that I think can really help to give you that experience, or at least like help you know what direction to aim towards. He was the chancellor at Wits. He was the chancellor of my university. He seems to attract these situations. Yeah. We'll see what happens. It's actually very exciting. You're like kind of on the inside. I don't know. He's very clever though, but I think it's an impossible job. Yeah. But I think also, I think the students have more power than they think they have. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things we discussed last time I did this presentation was often like the students don't advocate as a group, but you have a lot of power like together. I mean, you've seen if when people walked out of courses, you're like, but you have to be strategic about it because sometimes a strike isn't all that you can do. So you kind of have to be careful with where you choose to throw your weight. But students have a lot of power at universities. And I think we often get told that we don't because no one wants to make the change because that's a lot of work. But I think you and your other students have a lot of say in the situation. Yeah. think, yeah, I agree. I think it's a good way to move forward. So I also agree. Thanks for arranging this. Thanks. Bye.